The air in Harbor City had weight. It was a West Coast morning where the fog refused to yield to the sun, pressing down on the docks, making the colorful pyramids of the farmers' market look saturated, almost unreal. The smell of salt, damp air mixed with bruised peaches and wet pavement. Among the casual shoppers and steaming coffee cups, other men moved. They wore tailored wool that resisted the mist, their eyes scanning not the produce, but the crowd. Their presence was a low hum of dissonance in the morning's routine. Coco Ashford, 7 years old and perpetually in motion, did not notice them. She was focused on the mesh bag of oranges she'd been entrusted to carry. She took a sharp pivot to inspect a bucket of honey sticks and collided hard with a solid, tweed-covered leg. The bag flew, oranges scattered, rolling across the dark asphalt like escaped prisoners. "Oh, goodness, Coco!" Coco herself, however, had landed against the man and bounced back, unhurt. She looked up and up. The man was tall, with a shock of thick silver hair and eyes that crinkled kindly. Though they looked surprised, Coco, raised to be polite, clasped her small hands together, bowed her head slightly, and chirped, "Gomen nasai, Oji-san kuma." The world stopped for Eamon Vale. He hadn't been called that in 30 years. Uncle Bear, a silly, loving name given by a niece he had lost too soon, to hear it now, in Japanese, from a child who looked like a miniature whirlwind, struck him somewhere deep beneath the armor his life had required. He froze. The grandfather he'd never allowed himself to be stirring from a long hibernation. Mika Ashford rushed forward, her face flushed with embarrassment. "I am so sorry, sir." Coco, apologize in English. Mika, Japanese-American, straddled two worlds and tried to ensure her daughter navigated both gracefully. She began gathering the rogue oranges, her movements quick, efficient, the practiced economy of a freelance chef. No, it's quite all right." Eamon's voice was a gravelly resonance, and he stooped a movement that seemed to require effort to help her. "There's no harm done." He looked at Coco, who was watching him with wide, curious eyes. Eamon reached into his tweed vest pocket. He didn't retrieve a wallet, but a small piece of wood. He pressed it into Coco's hand. It was a simple, hand-carved wooden pin, buffed smooth in the shape of a sleeping bear. "Oji-san kuma," he repeated softly. "I like that." From the shaded entryway of a logistics office across the street, Lucien Vale watched the entire exchange. He saw the collision. He saw his father freeze. He saw the transfer of the wooden pin. Lucien Vale, who ran the clean side of the family's empire and the shadowed side with equal precision, missed nothing. And he was not the only one watching. As Mika stood, thanking Eamon profusely, two people approached her, a man and a woman, dressed in overly neutral polyester suits, holding clipboards. "Mika Ashford," the man asked. His tone was flat, carrying a bureaucratic chill that instantly killed the warmth of the market. "Yes. We're with Harbor Light Social Services. We received an anonymous tip regarding the welfare of your daughter. We need to see your custody documentation, please." Mika's blood ran cold. "Custody, I don't carry those papers to a market. We require you to come with us to the downtown office to verify your status," the woman said, her eyes flicking to Coco, who had hidden behind Mika's legs. It was wrong. The timing, the location, the aggression, it was a test. Across the street, Lucien Vale's jaw tightened. He didn't move, but he spoke quietly to the man beside him, the man in the red baseball cap, filming on his phone. "Fix it." The bodyguard moved without a word. He looked like a tourist, until he moved. He cut through the crowd, a large man in a neutral jacket, and accidentally slammed into the man in the cap. It was a heavy, jarring collision. The phone flew. The bodyguard apologized, helped the man retrieve the phone, and in the confusion of the recovery, palmed a second device, the man's actual tracking phone. The bodyguard was back at Lucian's side in under 40 seconds. Handing over the device, Lucian glanced at the screen. It was unlocked, the camera roll open. It contained 3 photos of Coco, 2 of Eamon and 1 zoomed in on the wooden bear pin. The Harbor Light agents were pressing Mika, their voices growing louder, attracting attention. Lucian nodded to his driver, the black sedan. "Create a block." The car, a long, dark German sedan, pulled silently from the curb and, with impeccable timing, cut off the agents' path as they tried to steer Mika toward their own vehicle, forcing them to stop, in that manufactured pause. Eamon Vale stepped forward. "Gentlemen, madam," Eamon said, his voice now lacking any grandfatherly warmth. It was cold steel. "I am Eamon Vale. This woman and her child are with me. If you have a problem, you will provide your credentials to my legal team, who are now on their way." The agents, recognizing a name that owned half the concrete in Harbor City, faltered. Their authority, so potent a moment ago, evaporated. They stammered, they looked at each other, and they retreated. Eamon met Lucian by the car moments later. After the mother and daughter had slipped away in the crowd, Eamon's face was grim. "That child," Eamon said, his voice low, "reminded me why the Vales must be different, why you must be different." Lucian nodded, his gaze tracking Mika as she hurried Coco away. He had seen her smile when his father handed Coco the pin, a brief, unguarded flash of light that had, for a second, cut through the fog. A seed had been planted. Miles away, in a glass office overlooking a different, sterile part of the city, a phone buzzed. Cassian DeVore, head of the Vesper Union, listened to the report. They backed off. Eamon Vale himself stepped in. DeVore smiled. "Good. We didn't want the child. We just wanted the reaction. We found the nerve, gentlemen. We touched the right one." Back on the street, Lucian Vale slid the tracker's phone into his own pocket. The small accident, the dropped oranges, the innocent pet name it had opened a door. And now, he had to see what was on the other side. The first blow landed electronically, without the decency of a human voice. Mika was scrubbing her hands in a commercial kitchen sink, the smell of citrus zest on her knuckles, when her phone buzzed with an email. It was the cancellation of a corporate catering gig, a major one. A 2-day event that was supposed to pay her mortgage for 3 months. The reason was sterile. "A preliminary report from the Meridian City Wellness Bureau has flagged your operation for non-compliance." Mika's heart hammered. A flag. She had never had a health inspection, let alone failed one. She called the client, but the line went straight to a polite, firm assistant. The decision was final. The deposit, they informed her, would have to be held pending the Bureau's full investigation. It was a squeeze. First, the bizarre encounter at the market, and now this. Someone was trying to suffocate her, not with violence, but with paperwork. Her saving grace was the guest chef spot at Narrowlie and Brass, one of Harbor City's rising temples of gastronomy. That night, she was in the weeds, the kitchen a chaotic symphony of sizzling pans and shouted orders. She was plating a specialized order, seared scallops with a black garlic and yuzu reduction. The head waiter, Julian, leaned in. "Table 7 says to send his compliments. He specifically mentioned the reduction, says it's the only thing in this city that tastes like it has a soul." "Who's Table 7?" she asked, not looking up from her plating. "Lucian Vale." Mika's hand froze. She looked through the pass, the narrow window between the kitchen's fire and the dining room's calm. There he was, the man from the market, the man in the gray suit. He was sitting alone, his back straight, his presence commanding the space around him. He wasn't Eamon, the kind Uncle Bear. This was the tiger. He knew she was looking. He lifted his glass, not to her, but in a general gesture toward the kitchen, and took a slow sip. The restaurant's most influential food critic was seated 2 tables away. Lucian Vale had not come to eat. He had come to be seen endorsing her. She met him after her shift, just past 11. The alley behind Narrowlie and Brass smelled of wet cardboard and rosemary from the kitchen's bins. He was leaning against the brick wall, a shadow in a $1,000 suit, his driver waiting in a dark sedan at the end of the alley. "Mr. Vale." "Miss Ashford, that was a remarkable meal." "Thank you for the endorsement," she said, her voice tight. She was too tired for games, but that was a performance, just like the market. "What do you want?" He didn't react to her accusation. Instead, he held out the phone his man had confiscated that morning. This is what they want. She took it. Her stomach hollowed out when she saw the pictures of Coco. The Harbor Light social services agents were fake, Lucian said, his voice low, steady. Their credentials were forged. Very good forgeries. But fake, just like the Meridian City Wellness Bureau. She looked up. Stunned. How did you know about that? It's my business to know when someone uses a false flag in my city. They are trying to squeeze you to get to my father. He pushed off the wall. I suggest you alter Coco's routine for the next few days. Do not be predictable. Mika clutched the phone. Her knuckles were white. Why are you doing this? Why did your father give Coco that pin? Lucian paused. For the first time, the polished armor of the businessman cracked. Because my father hasn't been called Oji-san Kuma since his sister died 30 years ago. He's not a grandfather. He appreciated the kindness. He looked uncomfortable with the admission. They are using you and your daughter to apply pressure. I won't allow it. She went home to the small apartment, the phone heavy in her pocket. Coco was asleep, one arm draped over the small wooden bear pin Eamon had given her. Mika sat on the edge of the bed, watching her daughter breathe. Coco stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Mommy. I'm here, baby. The Tiger Man was there. Coco mumbled sleepily. What? At the restaurant, when we left, the man in the gray suit, he looked like a tiger, but he smiled like a bear. The observation, so simple and sharp, stuck in Mika's mind, a tiger that smiled like a bear. The next day, a call came from Eamon Vale himself. He invited Mika and Coco to his private wood shop in the old Seaward Yards. He said he had something for Coco. Mika, remembering the phone and the threat, was hesitant, but Eamon's voice was warm, and she admitted, curious. The Seaward Yards were industrial but quiet. Eamon's shop smelled of cedar, varnish, and old-world patience. Lucian was there, but he stayed by the door, observing. His presence a silent guardianship. He seemed afraid that if he stepped any closer, he would drag them into the storm he inhabited. Eamon, however, was all warmth. He was sitting on a low stool, and he presented Coco with a new bear. This one was larger, carved from maple, its features smooth and kind, its arms open. Coco gasped and immediately hugged it. As Eamon showed Coco how to use sandpaper on a scrap piece of pine, his phone chimed, he glanced at it, and his smile tightened. He passed the phone to Lucian. Lucian read the screen. It was an internal report. The fake Harbor Light credentials had been traced, not to a government agency, but to a digital shell company, Atlas County Protective Services Special Audit. A name designed to sound intimidating and official. A name that meant nothing. It was Vesper Union, their rival, hiding behind bureaucratic ghosts. As Mika watched Eamon laugh with her daughter, her own phone vibrated. It was a text, an unknown number. Stay away from the Vales or lose custody. This is your only warning. Mika's hand trembled. She looked at Lucian, who was now watching her, his eyes sharp. He had seen her reaction. Eamon was oblivious, teaching Coco how to identify wood grain. Lucian looked at his father, at the genuine, uncomplicated joy on the old man's face. Then he looked at Mika, who was terrified but standing her ground. Lucian Vale made a decision. This was not business. This was not territory. This was a test of the man his father wanted him to be. He would protect them, not with the Vale army, but with the Vale mind. He would do it off the books. The text message burned a hole in Mika's pocket. She was at the wood shop, watching Coco and Eamon, and the contrast between the scene's warmth and the cold threat was jarring. Lucian stood near her, having just seen her react to the message. They've done this before, Lucian said, his voice a low rumble, not meant for his father or the child to hear. This is a pattern. What pattern? Mika asked, her voice sharp with fear. Threatening mothers. Threatening entrepreneurs, he corrected. Though it felt like a distinction without a difference, they find single-parent business owners, People with maximum leverage and minimal support. People like you. He looked at her, his gaze analytical. You're not married. No, Mika said, bristling. I'm divorced. My ex-husband, Eli, is a good man. We're still friends. He's a musician. He's touring Europe. We just wanted different things. He wanted the stage. I wanted a kitchen. It was amicable. I built my catering service from nothing. Mr. Vale, I did it legally. I know, Lucian said. I ran your background. Eli is in Berlin, and your credit is perfect. That's what makes you a target. You have everything to lose, and you've built it yourself. As if on cue, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was an email. Forwarded from her accountant, it was an official-looking PDF from the Federal Commerce Integrity Office, the FCIO. It was a notice of a full forensic audit and an immediate, temporary injunction on her business license, citing potential associations with non-compliant financial entities. It was nonsense, but it was legal-sounding nonsense. They were shutting her down. They're fast, she said, her voice hollow, showing him the screen. Lucian's jaw set. FCIO doesn't exist. It's Vesper, hiding behind another fake acronym. From across the shop, a delighted shriek. Oji-san Kuma, we made a mess. Mika and Lucian looked. Eamon and Coco were dusted in flour and black sesame seeds. A tray of misshapen, dark-flecked cookies sat on the workbench. Eamon was laughing, a deep, full-bodied sound that seemed to shake the sawdust from the rafters. Well, mess-making is the most important part of baking, Eamon called out. Come, Mika, try our creation. Mika walked over, the dread of the email momentarily eclipsed. Eamon offered her a cookie. It was warm, nutty, and delicious. She looked at this old man, this patriarch of a dangerous family, and saw only the kindest eyes. He was the father figure she had never had, a quiet port in a storm she hadn't known was brewing. Coco, her face smeared with flour, looked at Lucian, who was still standing in the shadows by the door. You too, Tiger Bear, she yelled. Lucian flinched, almost imperceptibly. At the new name, Eamon chuckled. You heard her, son. Come, try a cookie. Oji-san Kuma's orders. Lucian walked over. He didn't take a cookie, but he stood by the table. Coco looked up at him and patted his hand, leaving a dusty flower print on his expensive wool sleeve. Don't be grumpy, she advised. Lucian looked at the small handprint, then at his father, then at Mika, and for a second, the ice in his eyes melted. That simple, silly name, Uncle Bear, had done what no business deal or threat could. It had found the man inside the armor. Later that night, Lucian sat in his sterile, glass-walled office overlooking the city. A report was on his desk, compiled by his research team. The Vesper Union strategy was laid bare. They were using falsified records, school reports, vaccination records, anonymous tips to child services to pressure small business owners. Once the owners were terrified of losing their children or their livelihoods, Vesper would offer a solution. They would invest in the business, running small, untraceable amounts of money through their inventory, their payroll, petty money laundering, distributed over dozens of clean channels. He now understood. They didn't want to hurt Coco. They wanted to use Coco to turn Mika into another channel. He found her at her apartment. He had called first. I have a proposal, he said, standing in her small, neat living room. He felt oversized, a predator in a safe den. I don't want your money, Mr. Vale. This isn't about money. This is an honor contract. No lawyers, just words. He laid out the Vesper strategy, and he saw the color drain from her face as she understood the full scope of the trap. They want to make me a criminal, she whispered. They want to make you an asset, he replied. Here is my offer. My legal team will erase these threats. The FCIO, the Wellness Bureau, the Harbor Light Ghosts, they will vanish. In return, you allow me to provide minimal, non-intrusive security for Coco. A soft bubble. That's all. Mika crossed her arms. She looked at the door to Coco's bedroom. I have conditions. Name them. No violence. Not in front of her. Not for her. I don't want her world to become yours. Her gaze was unflinching, and no vague promises. "You say you will fix it. I need to see it fixed." "Done," Lucian said. It was the easiest negotiation he had ever made. The soft bubble was almost invisible. The next day, Coco's school had a new parent volunteer for pickup duty, a pleasant woman who was, in fact, one of Vale's best operatives. Mika's analog doorbell was replaced with a high-encryption smart camera that fed directly to a secure server. Coco's schedule became flexible. Her trips to the park varied. The counter-move to the FCIO came 2 days later. 2 men in suits did show up at Mika's food truck, which she had parked in defiant hope. They presented their injunction. Mika, terrified, simply said, "You may want to check your database." As they were about to place a physical "cease operations" sticker on her window, a lawyer in an even better suit, one of Vale's, appeared. "Gentlemen, that injunction is void, miss. Ashford's operations are now fully licensed and compliant under the jurisdiction of the Cascadia Regional Food Service Assessors. As of 6 this morning, your Federal Commerce Integrity Office, which, by the way, has no listed charter, has no standing here." The agents, faced with a superior, real authority, were powerless. They retreated, confused and defeated. Mika called Lucian. "It worked." Her voice was breathless with relief. "It was the first step," he said, his own voice steady. The rain against the penthouse glass was a relentless, cold drumming. Harbor City had vanished into a gray watercolor. Inside, however, was a bubble of impossible warmth. The apartment, a secure location Lucian had insisted she and Coco use, was all minimalist glass and steel, but Mika was filling it with life. The air was thick with the scent of roasted chicken bones, charred corn, and savory sweet soy. She was making ramen from scratch, a long, simmering act of defiance against the anxiety that had settled in her chest. The elevator chimed, a private sound in the apartment. Mika's hand tightened on her ladle. It was Lucian. He was here to personally inspect the upgraded security protocols. He stepped inside, bringing the cold smell of the rain with him. He looked, as always, like a man carved from expensive stone, his dark suit perfectly tailored, his face unreadable. "Coco," he called, his voice surprisingly soft. Coco, in her bear-themed pajamas, rounded the corner. She held a sheet of stickers. Without a word, she marched up to Lucian, peeled off a puffy sticker of a brown bear holding a honey pot, and pressed it firmly onto the sleeve of his suit jacket. "For you," she announced, "so you aren't so grumpy, Tiger Bear." Mika held her breath. Lucian looked down at the ridiculous, childish sticker on his immaculate sleeve. He did not remove it. A small, almost imperceptible muscle in his jaw twitched, and then he smiled. It was not a grin, not even a full smile, but a rare, brief lifting of the corners of his mouth that completely changed his face. "Thank you, Coco, it's very, official." "It's bedtime," Coco declared, and with the logic of a 7-year-old, she went to her room. Silence descended, filled only by the rain and the bubble of the broth. She likes you," Mika said, turning back to the stove, feeling suddenly awkward. "She likes my father," Lucian replied, walking to the kitchen island. He finally peeled the sticker off and, to Mika's surprise, slipped it carefully into his breast pocket. "I'm just the accessory." "She called you a tiger bear," Mika said, pouring broth into 2 bowls. "I've been called worse." He watched her move. "My father. He loves the Ojisankuma name. It's unlocked something in him. The part of him that existed before the harbor, before the difficulties." Mika placed a bowl in front of him. They ate for a few minutes, in a comfortable silence. "You grew up in this," she said finally, not as a question, but as a statement. "I grew up between 2 worlds," Lucian said, looking into the bowl. "My father's workshop, where he taught me that wood has a memory and that patience is a virtue, and the docks, which taught me that patience is a luxury and memory is a weapon. I've spent my whole life trying to honor one without being consumed by the other." His honesty was a raw nerve, more intimate than a touch. Mika picked up his empty bowl to take it to the sink. As she turned, he reached for it at the same time, to help. Their hands brushed. It was nothing, just the back of his fingers against her knuckles. A jolt, sharp and warm, passed between them, a missed heartbeat. Mika pulled her hand back instantly. Lucien, too, retracted his. As if burned, they were two cautious, wounded adults, and the tension in the air was suddenly so thick it was hard to breathe. As if the city itself was punctuating the moment, a brilliant, jagged fork of lightning split the sky, followed by an immediate, deafening crack of thunder. The lights in the penthouse flickered, buzzed, and died. They were plunged into absolute darkness, broken only by the pinprick lights of the distant, surviving city below. The rain was the only sound. Mika gasped, a small, involuntary sound. "It's just the building's auxiliary." Lucian's voice came from the dark, calm and close. "It will reset." She moved, by instinct, toward the massive window, where the view gave her a sense of space. He was there, too. They stood side by side, shadows against the lesser dark, the space between them no wider than a single water glass. The ambient light from the city below cast a faint, silvery outline on her cheek, catching the moisture on her eyelashes. He did not move. He just looked at her. "Mika," he said, and his voice was different, deeper, softer. She turned to face him. She could barely see his expression. Only the outline of his shoulders, the intensity of his stillness. "May I kiss you?" The question hung in the air, a perfect, fragile thing. It was not a demand, not a presumption. It was a request, giving her all the power. Her eyes, which had adjusted to the dark, said yes long before her lips could form the word. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. He moved slowly, deliberately. His hand came up, not to grab her, but to rest on her shoulder. It was a gesture of anchoring. His fingers were warm, his touch firm. He leaned in. The kiss was slow. It was warm. It tasted of nothing but honesty and the faintest hint of the broth they had shared. It was a kiss of profound, bone-deep tiredness, of two people finding a moment of quiet in the middle of a war. His thumb moved, just once, on her shoulder, a small, reassuring circle. She felt the rigid line of her own spine, a line she had held for years. Suddenly, relax. Her own hands, which had been clenched at her sides, found the fabric of his suit jacket, holding on. They broke apart, but did not move away. He did not release her shoulder. She did not release his jacket. They stayed, holding each other in the dark, for a moment longer than the kiss itself. Mika rested her forehead against his chest. She could feel his heart, a steady, strong beat beneath her ear. "I'm scared," she whispered, the admission torn from her. She felt his chin rest on the top of her head. He breathed in. "So am I." They stood there, a silent treaty, until the moment stretched. It was he who pulled back first, but only by an inch, a boundary, a promise to wait, for Coco, for safety, for the right time. And then, as if on cue, the lights flickered and snapped back on, bathing the room in a harsh, bright reality. They sprang apart, blinking like startled animals. Mika's face was flushed. Lucian looked undone. A quiet, awkward laugh escaped Mika. Lucian mirrored it, a short, huffed breath. The spell was broken, but the pact had been signed. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday. It was printed on heavy, some cream-colored cardstock, embossed with the logo of the Brighton Pier Foundation. It was a masterpiece of benign philanthropy. They were requesting the honor of Eamon Vale's expertise as a freelance advisor for a new youth vocational program centered on woodworking. In his glass-walled office, Lucian held the invitation to the light as if he could see the poison embedded in the fibers. "It's Vespera," he stated flatly, tossing it onto his desk. "The foundation's primary donor is a shell corporation, Saltfin Marine. We've seen it before. It's a trap. Father." Eamon, who had been examining the detailed proposal, looked up. His face was softer these days, less the patriarch, more the Oji-san Kuma Koko saw. A trap to do what? Lucian teach underprivileged teenagers how to use a lathe. Perhaps they are testing the waters of legitimacy. We cannot condemn an attempt to do good simply because we despise the source. It is not charity, it is leverage, Lucian argued, his voice tight. They are using your heart to get a hook into you. Then let them try, Eamon said, his voice firm. I will attend the signing. I will see the workshop. If it is a front, I will know. Lucian knew he could not argue. His father's newfound optimism, sparked by a 7-year-old girl, was a liability he could not insure. The other half of the pincer movement closed on Mika the following day. A certified letter, looking brutally official, arrived at the penthouse. It was from the fictitious Federal Commerce Integrity Office, citing a follow-up cooperation with the equally fictitious Harbor Light Social Services. They were scheduling a mandatory in-home child welfare assessment. The appointment was set for Friday at 2 p.m. Mika checked the calendar. The public signing ceremony for the Brighton Pier Foundation was also Friday. At 2 p.m., they were synchronizing the attacks, ensuring Lucian and Eamon would be occupied. The public attack began that night. A local gossip blog, one known for trafficking and rumor, posted a new video. It was grainy, clearly filmed on a cell phone. It showed Mika at the farmer's market, laughing as Eamon handed Coco the wooden pin, a quick cut, a shot of Lucian's dark sedan, parked outside her old apartment building, another cut, Mika at the wood shop, smiling. The caption was Venomous Catering Services single mom Mika Ashford's new recipe for success. Sources say she and her daughter have found a way to charm the Vales, landing a sweet deal. The cancellations began at 7 the next morning. The first was a polite email. We feel we need to move in a different direction. The next was a blunt text, contract terminated. By 10 a.m., her entire calendar for the next 2 months was a wasteland. The smear was working. She was untouchable. She was backed into the exact corner Vesper had designed for her. If she did nothing, she was ruined. If she ran to Lucian, if he made one public move to help her, it would confirm every word of the rumor. She would be the woman who used her child to secure the protection of a powerful man. She hid in the vast stainless steel pantry of the penthouse kitchen, her back against a sack of flour, her hand clamped over her mouth to silence the dry, ragged sobs of sheer panic. The pantry door creaked open. Coco stood there, not in her pajamas, but fully dressed. She was holding the large maple bear Eamon had carved for her. She looked at her mother, her small face a mask of a 7-year-old's gravity. She did not cry. She just walked forward, climbed into Mika's lap, and wrapped her arms around her mother's neck. "It's okay, Mommy," Coco whispered, her cheek pressed against Mika's. "I told my bear. Oji-san Kuma will know what to do." Mika held her daughter, and the terror solidified into a cold, hard resolve. Lucian arrived that evening, his face carved from granite. He'd seen the video. His team had charted the cancellations. "They've painted you into a corner," he said, his voice low. "So we walk out into the light. We embrace the storm." "What are you talking about?" "I'm offering you a new contract. The Vale Foundation is hosting its annual community fundraiser in 2 weeks. I want you to be the head chef, publicly. We will issue a press release. We will put your face and your food on every invitation. We will drown their whispers with a bullhorn." It was a lifeline. It was a battleship. And it was everything she could not accept. She stood up, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "No." Lucian looked stunned. "Mika, this is the only way. You need the cover." "No," she said, and her voice was stronger, steel forged in the fire of the last 24 hours. "I built my business with my hands. I will not have it saved by your name. The moment I accept your offer, I am exactly who they say I am, a woman who can't stand on her own, who needs a man's power to protect her. I don't want to succeed because people are afraid of you. Lucian, I want to succeed because my food is good. I won't trade my reputation for my security." He stared at her for a long, silent moment. The strategist in him was warring with the man who had been kissed in the rain. The man won. He gave a slow, deep nod of profound respect. "I understand." He turned and left her alone. That night, she was in the kitchen, kneading dough, working her fear into the flour. The private elevator chimed. It was Eamon. He looked tired, but his eyes were kind. He didn't mention the video. He just walked over to her counter, watching her hands work. "You have good form," he said quietly. He reached into his pocket and placed a small, dark piece of cherry wood on the counter. It was sanded velvet smooth, and carved into it in a simple, strong script was one word: grit. "My son is a good man," Eamon said, not looking at her, but at the wood. "He's strong, but he learned his strength watching resilient women. My sister, his mother were... And you... Do not let them break you. Mika." He closed her hand over the small piece of wood. Friday, 2 p.m. The Brighton Pier signing was a small, windy affair. Local media, city council members. Eamon, in his finest suit, was smiling. Lucian was on the perimeter, his security detail in full, visible force. Eamon was handed the pen to sign the ceremonial papers. As he uncapped it, a man in a Brighton Pier polo shirt hurried to his side, holding a cell phone. "Mr. Vale, I'm so sorry, sir. A call for you. It's the head of the youth program. Just a last-minute detail about the wood shipment." Eamon, ever polite, handed the pen back and took the phone. "Hello. Yes, this is Eamon." He listened. His smile faltered, replaced by a look of concern. He turned to the man in the polo shirt, gesturing toward a side office. "Yes, I understand. Of course." He took a step away from the podium, still on the phone, waving off his own security guard with a reassuring gesture. "It's fine. I'll just be a moment." He followed the man through a side door marked "Staff Only." Lucian, watching, felt the air temperature drop to 0. It was too smooth. "Father!" he shouted. The door clicked shut. Lucian's earpiece crackled with his head of security. "Sir, all cameras on the pier just went offline. All of them." Eamon Vale was gone. The text message arrived at 3 in the morning, a single, vibrating buzz on the nightstand that jolted Lucian from a sleepless, staring void. He didn't need to read the name. It was from a secure, encrypted line. "Want to see the old man safe? Leave Mika and the kid." It was the first punch. The second, more formal message arrived 60 seconds later, from a different burner. All business. "Vesper Union offers a reset, Mr. E. Vale is our guest, pending a review of our mutual interests. He will be released, unharmed, upon your immediate and permanent withdrawal from the 3 new Harbor City logistics contracts. You have 48 hours to announce the withdrawal. Failure to comply will result in a tragic, unavoidable industrial accident at our facility. We await your cooperation." They were trading his father's life for the future of his empire, and they had used Mika to do it. He drove himself to the penthouse. The rain had stopped, but the streets were slick and black. He used his own key. Mika was in the kitchen, a silhouette against the window's city lights, nursing a mug of tea. She hadn't slept either. She turned as he entered, her hand flying to her chest. "Lucian, my God, is he..." "He's alive," Lucian said. His voice was a flat, dead thing. "They've made contact." He stood across the kitchen island from her. He did not soften the blow. He could not. "They want me to trade the port contracts for his life, but that was just the leverage. The real message was about you." She looked confused. "Me?" Their first text was simpler. "They want me to abandon you and Coco, publicly. They want me to leave you defenseless so they can circle back and force you into their network. They are using you to wound me, and using my father to blackmail me." He took a breath, the confession tearing at him. "I brought this to you, Mika. My name, my father's kindness, my presence in your life is the weapon they are using against you. My existence is a danger to you and your daughter." He was giving her an exit. He was telling her to run, to take Coco and disappear, and he would fund it. It was the only honorable thing left to do. Mika set her mug down with a sharp click. Her face was not soft, not frightened. It was angry. A controlled, white-hot fury. "Leave," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "You think I'm going to run. You think I'm going to take Coco and hide while they hurt Eamon because it's dangerous." She walked around the island, stopping directly in front of him. "You don't get it yet, do you? I'm not leaving. We are not running. We are going to save your father, and we are going to do it the right way. Not your way, not their way, the right way." He was stunned by her ferocity. "Mika, you don't—" "I do," she insisted, and he saw the glint of tears in her eyes, born of rage, not fear. "They hurt an old man. They threatened my child. They tried to destroy my life. I am not leaving. I am in." He looked at her, really looked at her, the grit Eamon had seen, the sheer, unyielding force of her, the fear and exhaustion of the last 72 hours, the terror for his father, and the overwhelming, unwanted admiration for this woman. It all broke at once. He didn't move. She did. She put her hand on his chest, flat, over his heart. He could feel the tremor in her fingers. He was so still. He barely seemed to be breathing. Then he covered her hand with his own. He was the one who pulled her closer. The kiss was nothing like the first one. There was no hesitation, no question. It was a collision. It was desperate and angry and starving. It was the release of all the words they could not say. His hand moved from her hand to her nape, his fingers tangling in her hair, holding her to him as if he could absorb her strength. Her other hand came up, clinging to his shoulder. It was hot and breathless and tasted of the salt from a single tear that escaped her eye and rolled between their lips. He felt her unsteady gasp, her body pressing into his, seeking an anchor in the storm. It was a drowning kiss, and for a second they both let themselves sink. It was the very edge of control, a precipice. And it was Mika who pulled back first, her breath ragged. She broke the kiss, but she did not move, her forehead resting against his. "Lucian," she panted, her eyes closed. "We can't. Not like this, not in fear." He didn't try to change her mind. His hand on her nape gentled, his thumb tracing the line of her spine. He was shaking. "I know," he whispered. His voice was raw. They stood, holding each other in the dark. A mutual decision, love. If this was what it was, had to mean responsibility. It had to be clearer than this. "Mommy, The small voice from the hallway made them spring apart. Coco stood there, her maple bear clutched in one hand, her sleep-rumpled hair sticking up. "Are you fighting with Papa Bear?" Mika, her face flushed, instantly went to her daughter, kneeling. "No, baby, no. We were just worried." She stroked Coco's hair. "Mommy was sad and Lucian was being nice." "Are you sad about Oji-san Kuma?" Coco asked, her eyes wide. Mika looked at Lucian, a quick, shared glance. Truth. "Yes," Mika said, her voice steady. "Some bad people are keeping him. They're playing a very mean game, and we are making a plan to get him back." Coco nodded, as if this made perfect sense. "Okay, you should tell them to stop. It's not polite." Lucian watched, his heart a raw, aching knot. By 9 a.m., the Vale War Room was active. "They're holding him on a repair barge at Blackturn Pier," his head of security reported, pointing to a satellite map. "It's registered to Saltfin Marine, a known Vesper shell." "What about the task force?" Lucian asked. "The Pacific Shield Task Force. They're compromised, sir. The precinct captain for that pier is on DeVore's payroll. We call the cops. They'll either bungle the raid on purpose or Eamon will be gone before they arrive." Lucian stared at the map. "We're not going in loud. My father is on that barge. They're expecting a trade or a firefight." He looked at the wall, at the calendar of city events his team monitored. "They've chosen the battlefield. We'll choose the time. We are not negotiating. We are not fighting. We are going to bring the light into that dark hold." Mika, who had insisted on being there, stepped forward, looking at the calendar. Her eyes lit on an event for the coming weekend. "The Lantern Regatta," she said, her voice gaining strength. "It's this Saturday. The entire harbor basin will be filled with boats, thousands of people, all watching the water, all carrying lights." Lucian looked at her, a slow, predatory smile, the first real one she'd seen spreading on his face. He understood. "They've hidden him in the dark," he said. "We'll take him back in the light." The plan was elegant, born of Lucian's strategy and Mika's knowledge of the city's pulse. Lucian's team had discovered that Vesper wasn't just holding Eamon on the Saltfin barge. They were using the chaos of the Lantern Regatta to migrate their illicit data. The entire Vesper Union operation, the fake agencies, the shell companies, the blackmail files was being moved from a compromised land server to a mobile, anonymous server rack on the barge. Under the cover of a floating festival, they were cleaning house. "They're counting on the harbor patrol being distracted by the lights and the drunk tourists," Lucian explained in the war room, now located in a secure Vale high-rise. "They will be for a 30-minute window." The roles were set. Mika had, with surprising ease, secured the primary catering contract for the regatta's VIP viewing yacht. It was docked, conveniently, with a perfect line of sight to the Black Tern Pier. Her access badge would get her onto the pier itself. Her role get close enough to the temporary server setup on the barge to plug in a small, powerful data cloning device. Lucian would be on the water, in a dark, high-speed support boat, acting as overwatch and command. Eamon, if he was able and understood the noise, was to create a signal. There was one variable they had not accounted for. Santo Reyes, Lucian's second-in-command, a man who had been with the Vale family for 10 years, had met with a Vesper contact 2 days prior. He exchanged Lucian's entire plan for a certified check and a guaranteed non-extradition retirement in Panama. He had chosen the wallet over the blood. Coco was the one element shielded from all of it. She was having a special sleepover at the historic Mist Harbor Church with Hannah, her favorite babysitter, and 2 of Vale's plainclothes security, posing as church volunteers for the regatta festival. She was safe, painting pictures of bears, completely unaware of the storm. The night of the regatta, Harbor City was a jewel. The air was cool and clear. Mika pushed her stainless steel catering cart loaded with insulated boxes of high-end appetizers onto the pier. She wore a black chef's jacket, her hair pulled back tightly. She looked professional, calm. Her heart was a trapped bird in her ear. A tiny, flesh-colored comms unit connected her to Lucian. "Audio is clean," Lucian's voice murmured, a ghost in her ear. "You're at 90% visibility from my location. How are you? Mika." "My soy-glazed skewers are holding up well," she replied. The code for "I'm terrified, but I'm functional." She boarded the VIP yacht. The deck was filled with the city's elite, oblivious, champagne glasses in hand. From here, she could see the Saltfin barge, a dark, ugly shape squatting in the water at the end of the unlit Black Tern Pier. "The festival is starting," Lucian said. As if he had commanded it, the first lanterns were released. Thousands of paper lights, each holding a small flame, floated onto the water, a river of man-made stars. The crowd on the shore gasped. And then, from the barge, a new sound, a faint, rhythmic tapping. Clink, 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 pause, clank, 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 pause, clink, clink, clink. Mika's hand froze on her cart. "Lucian, are you hearing that?" "I hear it." Lucian's voice was tight with emotion. "It's my father. He found a hammer, 3 short, 3 long, 3 short, oats." The Vesper trap sprang. As Mika was about to move, the pier's speakers crackled. "Attention, please. Due to a safety concern on Pier 4, we are temporarily locking down all access gates. Please remain on your vessel." The yacht's captain emerged. "Sorry, folks, Port Authority. No one on or off the pier for a bit." Mika was isolated. Vesper had caged her. "Santo." Lucian's voice was calm in her ear. "The pier lockdown. Vesper's moving. I need you to create a diversion at the south gate. Get her a path." "On it, boss," Santo Reyes' voice replied, clear on the channel. Mika looked at the barge. The Vesper Tech team, 3 men in black, were now visible, running cables to a large, black server rack on the barge's deck. They were exposed. It was now or never. "They've locked me on the boat, Lucian, but they've left the service gangplank," she whispered. "I'm going." "Mika, wait for Santo's diversion." "There's no time." She pushed her heavy stainless steel cart toward the gangplank, as if going to serve the pier security. The cart was heavy, rattling. She lost control of it. It wheeled past the single Vesper guard, blocking his view of the barge's server rack for 3 critical seconds. In those 3 seconds, Mika, shielded by the cart, moved like a dancer. She ducked under the gangplank's railing, slid into the shadows on the pier, and slipped behind a stack of shipping containers. She was now invisible, just feet from the server. She gripped the data cloner, a small black rectangle. In Lucian's command boat, a secondary, private channel in his earpiece lit up. It was a failsafe, a dead man's switch audio feed from a mic on Mika's comms, separate from the main channel. He heard something Santo could not. He heard Santo's voice, not on the comms, but in the real world, whispering to someone. "She's off the boat. Take her. Now." Lucian's blood turned to ice. "Mika, abort now. Santo is the mole," he roared into the main channel. On the pier, Santo Reyes himself rounded the corner, flanked by 2 Vesper men. "Mika, give me the device. Don't be stupid." But Lucian was already moving. His high-speed boat, a black knife, cut through the water, silent, engine muffled. He was at the yacht's dock in seconds, vaulting the rail. He confronted Santo on the main deck, among the confused, lantern-watching guests. "You?" Lucian said, his voice lethal. He was unarmed. He had planned it that way. Santo, seeing him, sneered. "It was just business. Lucian, you're too soft. You and your old man." Santo reached for the gun at his hip. "You chose a wallet over blood," Lucian said. He didn't wait for the gun to clear the holster. Lucian moved, a blur of disciplined violence. He didn't punch. He closed the distance, deflecting the gun hand, his other hand seizing Santo's wrist, twisting it in a perfect, brutal jiu-jitsu lock. Santo screamed as his wrist snapped. Lucian followed the momentum, spinning him around, his arm locking across Santo's throat in a rear naked choke, cutting off the air. He held the choke, not to kill, but to control. Dragging the gasping traitor away from the crowd, he slammed him against a bulkhead. "Confess," Lucian hissed, his arm tightening. Santo, purple-faced, choked it out. "Devore on the barge. He has Eamon in the engine room. A trigger." Lucian slammed his head against the bulkhead, knocking him unconscious. He bound his hands with a zip tie from a nearby life vest station. Then he took Santo's phone, logged into a pre-prepared anonymous account for the North Shore Records livestream line, hit livestream video, and pointed the camera at the traitor's face. "The mole on the Veil team," he dictated, his voice cold. "Confessing to collusion with Vesper Union. The raid on Blackturn Pier is a Vesper trap." The truth was now public. He turned toward the barge, just in time to see Mika, having evaded capture in the chaos, running toward the salt fin. Mika didn't wait for Lucian's command. While he dealt with the traitor, she moved. She ran past the sparking, useless server rack, vaulting the low rail onto the salt fin barge. The Vesper techs who had been managing the data transfer, seeing their boss's betrayal exposed, scattered into the darkness. She followed the sound of the diesel engine and the memory of the tapping. She wrenched open the heavy steel hatch to the engine room. The air was suffocating, hot and thick with fumes. Eamon Vale was sitting on an overturned crate, his silver hair matted with sweat. He looked pale, but his eyes were sharp. In one hand, he still held the mallet he'd used to signal. In the other, he was clutching a small, perfectly carved wooden bear. It was the second one, the one he had been finishing for Coco. He had been whittling in the dark, a small act of defiant hope. "Mika," he breathed, relief flooding his face. "We have to go. Now." She pulled him up. His legs were unsteady, and he leaned on her. As they emerged onto the deck, they were met by Lucian, who had just leaped from the yacht onto the barge, but the deck was not clear. Cassian DeVore, the head of Vesper, stood by the barge's fuel lines. He was flanked by his 2 remaining personal guards. He was not panicked. He looked like a CEO chairing a difficult meeting, and he smiled. "A touching reunion," DeVore said, his voice smooth. "But unnecessary, Lucian. You've made your point. You found the leak. You impressed the lady. Now take your father. I am offering a truce. Leave Harbor City. Withdraw from the port contracts. Forget the girl and Mr. Vale will be allowed to enjoy a long, safe retirement." Lucian stepped in front of Mika, shielding her and his father with his body. The man who had kissed Mika in the rain was gone. This was the tiger. "We are done," Lucian said, his voice flat and cold, making deals based on fear. He pulled out his own phone. He wasn't calling for backup. He tapped the screen 3 times. "My team just activated the legal payload," he announced, his voice carrying over the water. "As of right now, 3 separate, mirrored public servers are uploading every file, every shell corporation Vesper runs, every fake document from the FCIO and Harbor Light, every piece of blackmail. The North Shore record has the master link. It's over." DeVore's smile didn't fade. It tightened into a rictus of fury. "You arrogant fool! If I can't have this city, I'll burn it, starting with this barge." DeVore lunged, not for Lucian, but for the main fuel valve on the deck. Twisting it open, he fumbled in his pocket and pulled out a butane lighter. Lucian raised the gun he had taken from Santo. But Mika moved faster. She was a chef. She understood fire, she understood pressure, and she understood metal. She shoved past Lucian, grabbed a heavy-duty spanner wrench from the bulkhead, and slammed the fuel valve back into the off position with a chef's practiced, violent strength. DeVore stared at her, stunned, and clicked the lighter. Before the flame could catch the fumes, Mika grabbed the industrial fire extinguisher from its mounting. She pulled the pin and aimed the nozzle. A massive, suffocating cloud of white, dry chemical powder blasted across the deck, smothering DeVore, his men, and the fuel tank. The lighter was extinguished. The threat was neutralized. In the chaos, Eamon, overcome by the fumes and the adrenaline crash, finally collapsed. Lucian caught him, lowering his father gently to the steel deck. Lucian was still holding the gun, his arm rigid, scanning the white cloud for DeVore. He was the predator, the man from the docks. His eyes narrowed, ready to end this. Mika stepped directly in front of him, into his line of sight. She was covered in white powder, a ghost in the lantern light. She looked like a warrior. She put her small, steady hand on the back of his, the one holding the gun. With her other hand, she reached up and cupped his face, his cheek rough with stubble and grime. She forced him to look at her. "Lucian," she said, her voice clear, cutting through his rage. "Don't go back to the darkness. They win if you do. Stay here." He stared at her. He saw her. Not the victim, not the asset, but the woman who had charged into the engine room, the woman who had faced DeVore with a fire extinguisher. The killing instinct in his eyes receded, replaced by a raw, painful humanity. He did not drop the gun, but his finger moved off the trigger. He lowered his arm. The sound of sirens approaching cut the moment, but it wasn't the real police. A blue and red light flashed as a harbor boat approached, carrying Vesper's final pawn. "This is the Pacific Shield Task Force," a megaphone blared. "We have a report of child endangerment, Mika Ashford. You are under arrest." It was DeVore's last trap, the compromised officers, but they were too late. The live stream from Santo's phone had been running for 4 minutes, the North Shore record, and now half of the regatta was watching. "Those aren't cops!" a voice yelled from the VIP yacht, a man filming with his phone. The live stream showed the fake badges. "It's Vesper. They're Vesper's men." The crowd on the water turned. 100 boats, 1,000 cell phones, all now pointed at the fake police. The officers saw the wall of cameras. They saw their authority, their very cover, evaporate. They cut their engine, confused. From the white cloud of chemical dust, Cassian DeVore emerged. Coughing, he saw the real police summoned by the live stream approaching from the south. He saw the public watching from the east. He scrambled to the far side of the barge, where a small, hidden speedboat was tied. He leaped in and hit the ignition. The engine roared. He was getting away. Eamon, leaning against Lucian, looked up. He was weak, but his eyes were fire. "Son, my pocket." Lucian, confused, reached into his father's overcoat. His fingers closed around a solid, heavy block of maple, the raw material for another bear. Eamon took it. He looked at the escaping boat. With a grunt of effort, a last surge of strength, he threw the block of wood. It wasn't a long throw, but it was perfect. It landed in the water directly behind the speedboat. There was a horrific crack as the propeller caught the dense wood. The engine screamed, choked, and died. The speedboat was dead in the water, 20 yards from the barge. DeVore, trapped between the public and the approaching real law, pounded his fists on the useless console. The final move didn't come from a gun. It came from Ojisan Kuma. The Blackturn Pier was suddenly silent. The only sound, the lapping of water against the pilings and the distant, approaching wail of real sirens. The chaos of the regatta, the thousands of lanterns, felt 1,000,000 miles away. Lucian's men, having boarded the barge, hauled the sputtering, soaked Cassian DeVore from his dead speedboat onto the wet, rotting wood of the pier. He was a prize, a defeated king, and they looked at Lucian, their eyes asking for the order to finish it. The old way. Lucian shook his head. "No," he said, his voice loud enough for them all to hear. "We end this with the lights on. We end this with the truth. No more executions in the dark." Eamon, leaning on Mika's shoulder but his spine straightening with pride, watched his son. He saw the man he had always hoped Lucian would be, the man he himself had failed to be. He reached into his own coat pocket, his hand closing around his old, worn pocket knife, the one he used for whittling. He walked to his son, and he didn't speak. He just pressed the closed, wooden-handled knife into Lucian's hand. It wasn't a weapon, it was a tool, a symbol of a man who builds, not a man who breaks. Lucian looked at it, then at his father, and closed his hand around it, a compact. "You're an idiot," Vela, DeVore spat, his corporate mask gone, revealing the feral animal beneath. "You think this is a victory? I have a dead man's switch. Every dirty file, every bribe, every body your father's generation buried in the foundation of this city. I'll burn your family name to the ground." The real police were arriving, their boat docking, but so was a smaller launch from the North Shore Record, its camera already rolling, the red light a malevolent eye. Lucian turned from DeVore and faced the camera. He faced the city. "He's right," Lucian said, his voice clear and ringing in the night air. The record reporter's jaw dropped. "The Vale family's history is not clean," Lucian continued, his voice resonating with a terrible, clean honesty. "They did things in the shadows. They hurt people. They used fear, and I will not run from that truth." He looked straight into the camera. "To any family who was a victim of my grandfathers, of the old way, I apologize. And tomorrow, I'm opening a new fund, seeded with my own money, for the longshoremen and immigrant families of this harbor. We cannot erase the past, but we can, and we will, build a better future." The crowd on the water, which had been cheering, was stunned into absolute silence. DeVore stared, his last bullet fired, his last bomb diffused. A woman in a crisp dark blue uniform stepped onto the pier. She was not from the compromised task force. Her name tag read Riley. "Mr. DeVore," she said, her voice sharp and clean. "You are under arrest for kidnapping, extortion, and 6 counts of wire fraud." She turned to the crowd. "The Pacific Shield Task Force is being placed under immediate internal review. We are cleaning house." She moved to cuff DeVore, but in that last second, with the last of his strength, DeVore saw Mika standing near Lucian. He lunged. A small, sharpened piece of metal, a shiv, was in his hand. He wasn't aiming for Lucian. He was aiming for her. Lucian moved. He didn't reach for the gun. He didn't open his father's knife. He did what a man of the harbor does. He grabbed the thick, heavy mooring line from the nearest cleat, and in one fluid, practiced motion, he looped the rope, throwing it like a lasso. It coiled perfectly around Devore's arm and torso, the shiv clattering uselessly to the wood. Lucian yanked the rope, pulling Devore off his feet. He handed the end of the rope to the astonished Officer Riley. "He's secure." Eamon put his hand on Lucian's shoulder. He was crying, his face awash in the flashing blue and red lights. "You did it," Eamon whispered, his voice thick. "You made Oji-san Kuma real, strong, and kind." Mika stepped forward, her face streaked with soot, sweat, and sea spray. Her chef's jacket was torn. She looked exhausted and beautiful. Lucian turned to her. In front of his men, in front of the police, in front of the cameras of the North Shore Record. He dropped the rope and took her hand. He didn't say a word. He just held it, lacing his fingers with hers, a public choice, a final stand. As if in a dream, the night sky exploded. The city, having received the all-clear, finally set off the Lantern Regatta's fireworks. Huge bursts of red, gold, and green erupted over the harbor, reflecting in their eyes. Through the chaos, a small figure broke past the police line. It was Coco, her babysitter Hana running behind her. "Mommy, Papa Bear, Oji-san Kuma." She ran, not to Mika first, but to Eamon. She hugged his legs with all her might. Then she looked up and saw the small, half-finished bear, the one he'd been carving on the barge, clutched in his hand. She took it from him. She examined it gravely. Then she pressed it back into his palm, closing his fingers around it. "You keep it," she said. Then she beamed. A gap-toothed, 7-year-old smile, and pointed from Eamon to Lucian. "I have 2 Oji-san Kumas now." The knot, tightened over generations, finally, fully came undone. The Vesper Union was broken, the fake agencies were exposed, but for Lucian, holding Mika's hand, watching his father laugh as he held his daughter, a new, harder and brighter chapter was just beginning. 3 months later, the Black Tern Pier was no longer a place of shadows. The rot had been torn out, replaced by fresh sawn pine. The air smelled of sawdust and opportunity. A new sign, carved from rich maple, hung above the entrance, the Harbor Bear Fund. It was Eamon's project, but it was Mika's heart. She and Eamon co-founded it, a foundation dedicated to teaching at-risk youth 2 skills: woodworking and the culinary arts. It was a place where a kid could learn to build a chair or bake a perfect loaf of bread. Lucian Vale was also rebuilding. He had sold off 3 of the most problematic logistics contracts, the ones Vesper had coveted at a significant loss. A public severing of the old ways. He'd installed an independent compliance department, run by the formidable Officer Riley, who had left the now reforming Pacific Shield Task Force for a chance to make real change. The Vale family was being redefined, not by power but by transparency. Sunday brunch became a tradition. It was held in Eamon's woodshop, the huge doors thrown open to the harbor breeze. The long tables were filled with sawdust. Half-finished projects and plates of food, the smells of cedar and hot dorayaki, Mika's specialty, pancakes filled with sweet red bean mingled with the salt air. This Sunday was special. Coco was hosting her first art exhibit. She had taped 20 pieces of paper to the workshop walls. It was titled, "My Bears." There were crayon drawings of Eamon, crayon drawings of Lucian. There was the original puffy sticker, now framed, that she had given Lucian. And there were a dozen small, beautifully carved wooden bears, each one a lesson Eamon had taught her. The community came in droves, dock workers and city council members, all eating pancakes and solemnly admiring Coco's work. That night, the city was quiet. Lucian took Mika to the rooftop garden of the penthouse. It was her garden now. She had planted mandarin trees and night-blooming jasmine. The city lights glittered below, a silent echo of the lanterns from that night. He didn't turn on the music. He just held out his hand. She took it. They danced slowly. No music but the sound of their breathing and the distant city hum. His hand was warm and firm on the small of her back. Her head rested on his chest, right over his heart. A steady, calm rhythm she had come to know better than her own. He smelled of soap and crisp cotton and the faint, citrusy scent of the mandarins. He leaned down, his lips brushing the hair at her temple. "I love you, Mika." It was a simple fact, a statement, as solid as the wood his father carved. It was not a grand, dramatic declaration, but a quiet, verified truth that had been tested by fire and fear. She leaned back, just enough to see his eyes. "I love you," she whispered, and it was a promise she had already been keeping. He smiled, that rare, full smile that still made her heart stumble. He reached into his pocket, but he didn't pull out a velvet box. He pulled out Eamon's battered, wooden-handled pocket knife. He didn't go down on one knee. He went down on a half knee, a carpenter's crouch, as if to examine a piece of work. He held the knife out to her, the dark cherry wood gleaming. "I don't have a ring. Mika, rings are for promises about forever. They're a circle." He looked up at her, his eyes raw with honesty. "I think we've had enough of circles, of the past repeating. This," he tapped the knife, "is for building. It's my promise to you and to Coco, not for forever, but for every single day. I promise to wake up and choose what is right, to build something good, to be a man you and she can be proud of, every day." Mika felt a single, perfect tear roll down her cheek. She didn't wipe it. She put her hand over his, over the knife, over the promise. Yes. He stood, and they held each other under the small, golden garden lights, a silent, binding oath. Across the water, at the Harbor Bear Fund, Eamon Vale was locking up. He looked across the harbor at the lights of the Vale Tower. He smiled. "Family," he said softly, "to the sawdust, is not who you are born to. It's who you protect." The next day, the North Shore Record published a full-page feature, "The Harbor's Shadow and the Bear's Light." It told the whole story, Vesper's crimes, the Vale family's complicated past, and the community's new hope. The city, it seemed, was ready to heal. The reformed Pacific Shield Task Force even signed an official agreement with the Harbor Bear Fund, creating a new mentorship program, turning the lessons of that night into official city policy. That evening, Lucien, Mika, and Coco were walking on the pier, the real pier, the one that now belonged to the people. Coco was running ahead, her laughter bright. She ran back, her face serious, and grabbed Lucien's hand. "What is it, Coco?" he asked, crouching down to her level. She looked at him, then at Mika, then back at him. She smiled, her gap-toothed, brilliant smile. "I know your new name," she announced. "Oh, you're not Tiger Bear anymore." She reached up and patted his cheek. "You're Papa Kuma." "Papa Bear." Lucien felt his heart, which had survived gunfire and betrayal, completely and totally melt. He couldn't speak. He just pulled her into his arms, lifting her high, burying his face in her hair. Mika came and stood beside them, leaning her head on Lucien's shoulder, her hand on Coco's back. The three of them stood there, a strange, beautiful, and perfectly built family. The lights of Harbor City glittered on the water, no longer a warning, but a promise. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe to Mafia Boss Story and give this video a like. And if you enjoyed this journey, please support us by pressing the hype button so more people can hear this story.